The road was empty, just the deep rumble of the ancient engine and the wind cutting through the cold night. Steven Seagal drove slowly, unhurriedly, as if he knew the value of every mile driven in silence. He was coming from a charity Aikido class at a community gym, 2 hours teaching safe falls to young people who'd never had anyone to teach them how to fall without getting hurt. There was no audience, no cameras, just old mats and mutual respect. The lights of a 24-hour diner appeared on the right. Steven signaled, pulled in slowly, and parked far from the entrance. He turned off the engine. He took a deep breath. The night was too calm to ignore. Inside, the smell of stale coffee and toast lingered. A middle-aged waitress was wiping the counter, tired but attentive. Steven sat in the corner, his back to the wall. An old habit, never forgotten. Green tea, if you have it. She smiled. I have. It's rare for anyone to ask. While he waited, Steven checked the mirror behind the counter. 2 cars in the parking lot. No suspicious movement, just the slow breathing of dawn. The waitress brought the steaming cup. Quiet night? He asked gently. More or less. Sometimes strange people pass by. Motorcyclists. Noisy. Steven nodded understandingly. If you ever need help, call someone. Don't wait for the problem to get worse. She frowned, but not with fear. With curiosity. Are you a security guard? I teach people how to protect themselves, but the best thing is to never need it. She smiled again, this time with real warmth. Good advice. Steven drank slowly. Steam rose in thin spirals, breaking the yellowish light from the ceiling. Nothing moved quickly in there. Everything breathed at the same rate. Slow, sure, human. He paid, left a generous tip, and walked to the door. The waitress watched him leave. She didn't know who he was, but she sensed something, a presence that soothed rather than warned. Steven stopped in the doorway. He looked up at the sky. There were few stars, thick clouds in the distance. The wind had changed direction. He took another deep breath, and then he heard the distant sound of revving engines, 3, maybe 4, coming toward the diner. Steven didn't move. He just adjusted his posture, loosening his shoulders, letting his arms hang loosely at his sides. Calm was not the absence of danger, it was preparation. The 3 motorcycles entered the parking lot like predators circling their territory. High beams, deep-throated engines, black leather, chains, tattoos visible even from a distance. Steven didn't go back inside. He stood beside the car, keys in hand, posture relaxed, watching. The leader got off first. Tall, with a thick beard and a calculating gaze. He walked slowly, savoring his control of the space. The other 2 followed, one filming with his cell phone, the other blocking the exit with his motorcycle across the street. Nice car, the leader said, stopping 2 meters away from Steven. Old. Fragile. Steven just nodded politely. Thanks. The second biker laughed. A forced, rehearsed sound. The kind of laugh that demands an audience. Are you lost, old man? This road is not for tourists. Steven looked around calmly. I didn't know it had an owner. The leader took a step forward, invading personal space, testing. Now you know. Steven didn't back away, but he didn't advance either. He just held his gaze, steady, unchallenged, like someone watching a passing cloud. The biker filming circled around, trying to capture the perfect angle. His phone trembled in his hand. He wanted the humiliation recorded, proof of dominance. Content. Are you just going to stand there? The third one teased, leaning against the hood of Steven's car. Or are you going to excuse yourself? The waitress appeared at the diner window, looking concerned. Steven made a discreet gesture with his hand. Don't worry, stay inside. She hesitated, but obeyed. The leader noticed. Oh, you're a protector, a movie hero. Steven took a deep breath. Slowly. Just someone who wants to leave without any problems. A problem. The leader smiled. The problem is arriving here thinking the road is yours. Silence. The wind died down. The motorcycles were still running, but the sound seemed distant, as if the world had decided to pause and watch. Steven looked each of them in the eye, one at a time. No anger, no fear, just recognition. The biker filming lowered his phone for a second. Something in Steven's gaze bothered him. It wasn't a challenge. It was something else. Something he couldn't name. The leader took another step. This time, chest to chest. You will respect us. Steven didn't blink. Respect is not demanded. It is offered. The sentence fell like dead weight. The third biker stopped laughing. The one filming raised his cell phone again, but his hand was shaking, and the leader, for the first time, felt that the siege might not be as secure as it seemed. The leader didn't like the silence Steven's statement created. He needed to regain control, fast. Respect? He spat on the ground near Steven's feet. I'll teach you respect. He held out his hand, palm open. Give me the car keys. Steven didn't move. Why? Because I want to test the humility of those who speak beautifully. The other two laughed. This time, louder. They needed to believe they were still in charge. The cameraman zoomed in. He wanted to capture the surrender. The moment of defeat. The calm man finally breaking. Steven looked at the key in his hand, then at the leader. No. The word fell dry. No emotion. Just fact. The leader's smile died. What? I'm not going to give you the key. Dense silence. Dangerous. The third biker got off his motorcycle and approached. Now there were 3 of them in a semicircle, attack position. The leader stepped forward and shoved Steven in the chest. Not hard, just enough to assert his territory. Steven swayed slightly, but didn't react. The push came again, firmer, more anger. Steven absorbed it, feet steady, breathing controlled, eyes still calm. Are you going to fight back or are you a coward? The second biker taunted. Steven adjusted his shoulders slowly, like someone straightening a wrinkled jacket. Courage is not hitting someone who doesn't want to hit back. The cameraman hesitated. He lowered his phone for 2 seconds. Something about the scene wasn't right. The humiliation should have been obvious. But Steven didn't look humiliated. He looked patient. The leader didn't like it. Do you think you're better than us? Steven took a deep breath. No, I just think I don't need to prove anything by pushing anyone. The leader advanced again. This time, his hand went straight to Steven's collar, pulling him closer. Clothes wrinkling. Hot breath. Real anger. You will respect me now. Steven didn't resist. He let himself be pulled in. But his eyes didn't move. They remained steady, deep, like a mirror reflecting everything back. And there, inches from the leader's face, Steven said softly, respect doesn't come from force. It comes from what you do with it. The leader let go of his collar. Not because I wanted him to, because something in that voice made him flinch without realizing it. Steven slowly straightened his clothes. He picked up his wallet that had fallen to the floor and put it in his pocket. He straightened his jacket. Every gesture was slow, deliberate, unhurried, like someone who has already won without having to fight. The sound of motorcycles in the background seemed distant now. The wind returned, and with it, an invisible weight in the air. The one filming swallowed hard. The third biker looked at the leader, waiting for order. But the leader didn't give any orders. Because, for the first time, he didn't know what to do with a man who wasn't afraid. Nobody moved. The parking lot became a frozen stage. 3 bikers in a semicircle. A calm man in the center. The diner's yellow light flickering softly in the background. Steven finished straightening the jacket. He ran his hand over the fabric one last time, removing invisible dust. Then he looked at each of them in turn. Slowly, one at a time. First, the one filming. His phone was still raised, but his hand was shaking. Steven held his gaze for 3 seconds. No judgment, just recognition. The young man lowered his arm. He didn't know why. He just felt he should. Then came the third biker, the one who had laughed the loudest, now silent. Steven inclined his head slightly, as if in greeting. There was no response, just discomfort. Lastly, the leader. Steven stared at him longer, not with defiance, with something worse, understanding, like someone who's seen that kind of anger before, and knows it comes from somewhere deep, dark, unresolved. The leader felt it. and he hated feeling it. "What are you looking at?" His voice came out weaker than he intended. Steven didn't answer immediately. He took a deep breath. The sound of air flowing in and out was audible now, controlled, deep, like a monk before meditation. "I'm looking at you," Steven said finally, "and I see someone trying to prove something that doesn't need to be proven." The words fell like stones into still water. The sound of the motorcycles in the background began to sound ridiculous. A pointless noise, a forced roar. The wind blew again, stronger. It kicked up dust from the asphalt. It ruffled Steven's hair slightly, but he didn't blink. The third biker took a step back. Small, almost imperceptible, but enough. The leader noticed, and that made him even more angry. "Do you think you know who I am?" Steven adjusted his stance, feet firm, shoulders relaxed, hands open, palms facing slightly forward. Neutral position, but anyone who understood fighting would know. It was the most dangerous position. "I know you're someone with a choice," Steven said slowly, "and that you can still choose how this ends." Silence. Dense, long. The one filming had now lowered his phone completely. He put it in his pocket. He didn't want to record anymore. Something in the scene had changed. It wasn't funny anymore. It wasn't simple anymore. It was too real. The leader clenched his fists. His jaw was set. His eyes were fixed. But his feet did not move forward, because he felt something he had never felt in situations like this. Doubt. Not about who would win, but about what would happen next. Steven remained still. Not threatening. Not backing down. Just existing, like a mountain facing a storm, not fighting the wind, just standing. And there, in that heavy silence, something intangible changed hands, the control, without anyone realizing exactly when. Only now, the calm man was no longer surrounded. He was the center. The leader decided to put an end to it. He thrust his right hand forward, quickly, straight to Steven's pocket. He was going to snatch the key by force, regain control, end the scene just as he'd planned. But the hand never got there. Steven moved minimally, just enough. He rotated his hip 3 centimeters to the left, redirecting the leader's arm with an open palm. No holding, no blocking, just guiding. The biker's own momentum carried him forward, off balance. Steven took a sideways step, matching the movement, and with his other hand lightly touched the attacker's elbow. It wasn't a push. It was a suggestion, and the leader's body understood. He staggered to the side, tripped over his own foot, and the bike, his, began to tilt. The leader tried to hold her back, but the weight was already falling. Metal scraped against asphalt. A high-pitched sound. Humiliating. The motorcycle slowly fell over, like in slow motion. And along with it, pride. The third biker took an instinctive step forward, but Steven held up his hand. That was it. Open palm. The universal gesture. It seems. And he stopped. The one who had filmed stood still, mouth half open, eyes wide. It didn't make sense. No one touched anyone. But the motorcycle was on the ground. The leader stood up, panting. His face was red. Not from exertion, from embarrassment. "What the hell did you do?" Steven didn't answer. He just adjusted his posture again. Hands open, feet steady, breathing controlled. The leader advanced again. This time, with real anger. He tried a straight punch. Quick, no technique, just fury. Steven swerved slightly. The fist passed inches from his face, and in the movement, Steven touched his attacker's wrist. Again, not holding, just redirecting. The leader spun. He lost his bearings. His feet got tangled up, and he fell, on your knees, on the asphalt. Even the sound of the motorcycles seemed embarrassed. Steven stepped forward. Slowly, he held out his hand. The leader looked at her, confused, angry, afraid. "Get up," Steven said. His voice was firm, but not cruel. The leader hesitated. Then, with visible effort, he accepted the hand. Steven pulled him up, firmly, unhurriedly. When the leader stood, Steven didn't let go immediately. He held on for another 2 seconds, eye to eye. "I'm not fighting you," Steven said quietly. "I'm showing you that you don't have to." And then he let go. The leader took a step back. He stumbled again, but this time caught his balance. He looked at the other two. They weren't laughing. They weren't mocking. They were as lost as he was. Steven walked over to the fallen motorcycle. He bent down. He carefully lifted it. He leaned against the kickstand. He straightened the bent rearview mirror. No one spoke, because there was nothing to say. The lesson had already been taught, and everyone felt it. The leader couldn't process. His motorcycle was upright, tidy, cared for, by the man he tried to humiliate. He looked at Steven, then at the other two, searching for some logic, some sense. Didn't find it. The third biker stepped forward, more cautious now, but still angry enough to try. "My turn." He advanced sideways, trying to catch Steven from behind. A cowardly move, but effective, or at least it should be. Steven heard the footsteps. He turned gently. He met the incoming arm. He didn't block it. He simply followed the energy. He redirected the attacker's body to the side. The biker stumbled, lightly hitting the hood of the car. He wasn't hurt, but he felt ridiculous. Before he could recover, the one who had filmed lost his temper. Enough of this. He dropped his phone on the ground and ran, straight away, without thinking. Steven turned calmly. He saw the attack coming. He waited for the exact moment. When the young man was 2 feet away, Steven took a diagonal step. He touched his shoulder with an open palm. That was it. The young man spun. He lost his balance. His knee touched the ground before he knew how. 3 men, 3 falls. No real violence. The leader felt something break inside him. Not bone, not muscle. Something worse. Steven stood in the center, breathing calmly, hands open, as if nothing had happened. The third biker slowly got up from the hood. He looked at the leader, waiting for orders, but none came. The young man on the ground knelt down, looking at his hands, confused, ashamed. The leader clenched his fists, his jaw clenched, his eyes burned. "Who the hell are you?" Steven took a deep breath. Slowly. Then he spoke, his voice firm, clear, without arrogance. "My name is Steven. Steven Seagal." The name fell like a silent bomb. The third biker froze, eyes wide. The young man on the ground lifted his head, mouth open. The leader took an involuntary step back. Everyone knew the name. Movies, legends, Aikido. No one knew if it was true or marketing, but now they knew. It was true. Steven stepped forward, not threatening, just present. "I teach you not to hurt," he continued, looking at each of them. "I teach you how to redirect, how to dismantle anger without destroying your body." He pointed to the ground, to where each of them had fallen. "You weren't knocked down. You lost your balance. I just showed you the way." Dense silence. The wind stopped again, as if the whole world was listening. The leader lowered his gaze. For the first time, unable to look. We didn't know." Steven shook his head. "It doesn't matter who I am. It matters who you choose to be." The sentence came in like a sharp blade. The young man on the ground slowly stood up. He brushed the dust off his pants. He looked at Steven with something new in his eyes. Respect. The third biker let out a breath. His shoulders relaxed. The fight was over, and he knew it. The leader stood still, looking at his own upright motorcycle, at the ground where he had fallen, at the man who had helped him up, and he felt, for the first time in years, something he hadn't expected to feel. Real shame, not to be missed, of having tried to win. Steven walked to the car. He opened the door slowly. He paused before getting in. He looked back. "You can leave, or you can stay. The choice is yours." And then he got in. He closed the door. He started the engine and waited. The car's engine idled. Steven waited, hands on the steering wheel, looking in the rearview mirror. The 3 bikers remained standing in the parking lot, like broken statues, unsure of what to do with the silence that now weighed more heavily than any sound. The young man was the first to move. He walked over to the phone lying on the floor. He picked it up slowly. The screen was cracked. He stared at the paused video. The recording showed the beginning, the arrogance, the laughter, the provocation. But it didn't show the end. He didn't record the falls. He didn't record the revelation. He didn't record the shame. And something inside him was grateful for that. The young man stared at Steven through the car window. 2 seconds. 3. Then he lowered his head. Not in fear. In recognition. Steven made a small gesture with his hand. Just waving, as if to say, "It's okay." The young man swallowed hard. He put his cell phone in his pocket and walked over to the motorcycle. He climbed on, but he didn't start the engine yet. The third biker looked at the leader, waiting. Always waiting for orders. But the leader wasn't giving orders anymore. He was looking at his own hand. The one Steven had grabbed. The one that had pulled him up off the ground when he could have left him there. When he could have humiliated him. When he could have truly won. But he didn't win. He taught. The leader closed his eyes. He took a deep breath. Then he walked to Steven's car window. He tapped lightly on the glass. Steven lowered himself, slowly. The leader didn't know what to say. His words tangled together. Pride and shame fought for space. He tried, You think you're better than us?" The voice was shaky. It wasn't a provocation. It was a real question. Steven turned off the engine. He turned in his seat. He looked at the leader, straight in the eye. "No," he said firmly, "but I think you can be better." The sentence hit like a punch to the chest. The leader lowered his gaze. He bit his lip. Then he looked at the other two. At the parking lot. At the empty road. We overdid it. It wasn't an excuse. It was an admission. Steven waved. "Yes, you exaggerated. Break. But you can still fix it." The leader frowned. "How?" Steven got out of the car. Slowly. He stood in front of the leader. Same level. Same ground. "Let me show you something." The third biker approached, cautiously. The young man got off his bike, curious. Steven looked at the three of them. "If someone holds you like this," he made the gesture, arm extended, as if someone were grabbing him. "What do you do?" The leader hesitated. Steven shook his head. "It is not necessary." He guided the leader's arm to his own shoulder. He demonstrated the movement, smooth, redirecting, bringing the weight down without brute force. You go with the energy. You don't fight it. You let your body do the work. The leader tried. Clumsily. But he tried. Steven adjusted his position. Again. The leader repeated. Better this time. The young man took a step forward. "What if it comes from behind?" Steven smiled slightly. "First time all night. Show me your arm." The young man held out. Steven guided, demonstrated, explained without words. Just gesture, just movement. The third biker watched, silently, but attentive. And there, in the empty parking lot, under the diner's flashing yellow light, something changed. It wasn't forgiveness. It was the beginning. Steven taught for 10 minutes. Simple movements. Safe falls. How to escape a hold without getting hurt. The three tried. They failed. They tried again. And for the first time that night, no one was trying to prove anything. They were learning. When Steven stopped, the leader stood still, taking a deep breath. "Why are you doing this?" Steven straightened his jacket. "Because someone did it for me, when I was young and dumb." The leader almost smiled. Almost. "And did it work?" Steven looked at him. Serious, but kind. "You tell me." Steven walked over to the bikes. The three bikers watched, still processing, still trying to understand how the night had turned so wrong. He stopped in front of the first bike. The third biker's. It was crooked. The handlebars were out of alignment. The rearview mirror was hanging off. Steven bent down. He carefully adjusted the rearview mirror. He aligned the handlebars. He wiped the dust off the tank with his jacket sleeve. The third biker stepped forward. I do it." Steven looked at him, waved, got up, gave him space. The biker finished the job, hands trembling, eyes downcast. Steven walked over to the second bike. The young man's. It was intact, but the kickstand had sunk slightly into the cracked asphalt. He carefully lifted the bike. He moved it a few inches. He landed it on solid ground. The young man approached slowly. "Sorry," he said softly, almost inaudibly. Steven stopped. He looked at him. "For what?" For everything. For filming, for laughing, for..." Steven raised his hand. "Kindly. You stopped. That matters more." The young man blinked rapidly, something wet in his eyes. He nodded. He didn't trust his voice. Steven picked up the leader's helmet, which had rolled away. He shook off the dust. He brought it back. He handed it to the leader. "You're..." The leader looked at the helmet, then at Steven. "What is the explanation for you doing this?" Steven didn't respond immediately. He just held his helmet in the air, waiting. The leader took it, slowly, as if he were picking up something sacred or dangerous. Steven took a step back. He looked at the three of them, then at the bikes lined up. "Ready? You can go," he said calmly. "The road is clear." Nobody moved. The wind blew again, softer now, carrying the smell of cold asphalt and motor oil. The young man was the first to climb onto the bike. He put on his helmet. He didn't start the engine yet. He just sat there, waiting for the others. The third biker did the same. He climbed up. He straightened up. He looked at the leader. The leader remained still, helmet in hand, eyes fixed on Steven. "I still don't understand," he said hoarsely. Steven tilted his head. "What? Why didn't you hurt us? You could have... easily." Steven took a deep breath. "Because hurting is easy," he said slowly. "Teaching is what hurts." The sentence hung in the air, heavy, true. The leader lowered his gaze. He clutched his helmet in his hands. We were rude to you." "Yes," Steven confirmed. No anger, just fact. "And you still helped us?" "Yes." The leader looked up. He tried to smile. He couldn't. But something changed in his face. Something soft, broken, human. "Thank you," he said quietly. Steven nodded. That was it. The leader put on his helmet. He got on his bike. He started the engine. The roaring sound filled the parking lot again. But now it felt different. It was no threat. It was just sound. The three of them stood there, engines running. But no one accelerated. No one left. Steven walked back to the car. He opened the door. He paused before getting in. He looked back. The three bikers watched him. Helmets closed, but their postures had changed. Shoulders less rigid, heads slightly tilted. Respect. Steven waved one last time, and they waved back. Then, slowly, the three motorcycles left the parking lot, not at a sprint, not with an arrogant noise, in line, respectful, silent. Steven stood still, watching the red lights fade away, disappearing around the bend in the road. The wind blew again, and with it, peace. 3 days later, Steven returned to the same diner, same time, same corner table. The waitress recognized him immediately. She smiled broadly. "Green tea, please." She brought the cup. Steaming, the soft scent of herbs. "You disappeared," she said curiously. "I thought you weren't coming back." Steven smiled slightly. "I just needed time." She was about to ask more, but the diner door opened. 3 men entered, leather jackets, heavy boots, but something different now. Less aggressive posture, less harsh looks. The leader saw Steven. He stopped. The other 2 stopped behind him. The waitress sensed the tension. She took a step back, but Steven held up his hand. Calmly. "All good." The leader walked to the table. Slowly, he stopped a meter away. Can I sit?" Steven pointed to the empty chair in front. "Of course." The leader sat down. The other 2 stood, unsure of what to do. Steven looked at them. "Sit down too. There's room." They hesitated. Then they pulled out chairs. They sat uncomfortably, like students in the principal's office. Silence. The waitress returned, cautious. "Do you want anything?" The leader looked at her. then at Steven, then back at her. 3 T's, just like his. She blinked in surprise, but she nodded and went to get ready. The leader looked at his hands on the table, calloused, bruised, the hands of those who work hard and fight even harder. We passed by here every day," he said quietly, "waiting for you to show up." Steven took a sip of his tea. "Why?" The young man shifted in his chair, restlessly. "Because we—" He stopped. He swallowed hard. "Because we wanted to say thank you properly." Steven placed the cup on the table, slowly. "They already thanked you?" "No." The leader shook his head. "Not the right way." He looked up, red eyes, tired. "You could have destroyed us. You could have called the police. You could have humiliated us back. Break. But you taught us." His voice broke slightly on the last word. "We showed the moves to the people at the club. Aikido. Control. What you taught." Steven tilted his head. "And?" The young man smiled, small, genuine. "They laughed at first. But then they tried, and it worked. No one got hurt," added the third. "In a fight that always ends with someone in the hospital." The leader took a deep breath. "You changed something," he said firmly now. "Not just in us, in everyone around us." Steven was quiet, just listening. The waitress brought the 3 teas. She placed them on the table carefully. She looked at Steven, seeking confirmation that everything was okay. He waved, kindly. She walked away. The leader took the cup. He felt the heat. He drank slowly. "That's good," he said in surprise. Steven smiled. Yes, comfortable silence this time. No weight, no tension. The young man looked at Steven. You teach? Like, really? Sometimes," Steven replied. "When I meet people who really want to learn." The leader looked at the other 2, then back at Steven. "We want it." Steven studied the 3 of them, one by one. He saw something he hadn't seen that night in the parking lot. Saw opening. "Aikido isn't about winning," he said slowly. "It's about not having to fight." The leader waved. "We understand that." Finally, Steven finished his tea. He placed the cup on the table. "So you've already started?" The third biker frowned. "Like this." "Because you came back," Steven explained. "Not to challenge, to thank. That's Aikido." The sentence fell softly, but profoundly. The leader lowered his head, not in shame, in recognition. "Thank you," he said again, but this time differently, with real weight. Steven stood up. He grabbed his wallet. "The bill is mine." "No!" The leader stood up quickly. "Let us pay, please." Steven looked at him, considered, then nodded. "All good." He walked to the door. He stopped. He looked back. "You know where to find me," he said calmly. "If you really want to learn." The 3 of them waved. Together. Steven left. The door closed slowly behind him, and there, at the table, sat 3 men, tea steaming, hands trembling slightly, not out of fear, of relief, because they finally understood what true strength means. It's not what you can do with it. It's what you choose not to do. The waitress watched Steven leave. She stood behind the counter, cloth in hand, looking at the table where the 4 men had been talking. 3 bikers, a calm stranger. She didn't fully understand what had happened, but she felt it. He felt it in the way they entered, stiff but respectful. He felt it in the way they spoke, quietly, without arrogance. He felt it in the way they looked at him, not with fear, but with something greater, admiration and respect. The 3 of them finished their tea in silence. They left money on the table, more than necessary. As they got up to leave, the leader stopped before her. "Sorry," he said simply. "If we ever scared you." She blinked in surprise. "All good." He waved. He left with the others. The door closed. She was left alone. He walked to the table. He picked up the cups. He saw the money. He picked it up. He felt its weight. Underneath the notes, a folded note. She opened it, firm handwriting, few words. "Thank you for keeping your cool that night. Sometimes Bearing witness in silence is the greatest courage. Stephen, she read it twice. 3 times. Then she folded it carefully and put it in her apron pocket. I didn't know who Stephen was. I didn't need to know. I just knew something had changed. In that parking lot, that night, in those men, and somehow, in her too. Already on the road, Stephen drove slowly along the empty road. The window was open. The cold wind was blowing in. The low sound of the engine mixed with the silence of the night. He thought of the 3 men, the leader trying to learn the moves, the young man putting away his cell phone, the 3rd man making room to listen. He thought of all the times he'd been that young man himself, arrogant, blind, needing someone who wouldn't break him, but guide him. Someone had done this for him, a long time ago, in a dojo in another country, with patience he didn't deserve, and now he did the same, not because he was a hero, because someone needs it. The road stretched out ahead, dark, empty, but he was in no hurry, never had. At the motorcycle club. Days later, the leader taught a simple movement, wrist redirection, no force, just flow. 5 men watched, skeptical, but curious. 1 tried. He failed. He tried again. He succeeded. "It works," he said in surprise. "It always works," the leader replied, "if you stop fighting it and start following it." Someone laughed. "Did you become a monk or what?" The leader smiled small. "No. I just met someone who showed me that strength isn't about who hits the hardest." "What is it about then?" The leader paused. He thought about Stephen's words, the way he lifted the bikes, his patience. "It's about who chooses not to hit." Silence. And then, one by one, they went back to training. Another day while traveling. Stephen parked in front of a community gym. Small, old, worn-out mats. Children waited inside. Simple clothes. Big eyes. He walked in. He greeted the instructor. He tied his belt. And he began to teach. Not about punches. Not about spectacular falls. About balance. About respect. About how to fall without getting hurt. On how to lift up another person who has fallen. A girl raised her hand. "Why do we learn this?" Stephen crouched down. He looked at her. "Because one day, someone will try to take you down, and you will have to choose." "Choose what?" "Whether you're going to retaliate with anger, or teach calmly." The girl frowned, thinking, "What if I teach?" Stephen smiled. "Then you really win." She nodded, seriously, as if she understood something too big for words. Stephen returned to the center of the mat, and he continued teaching. If you like this story, leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell. Don't forget to comment on which part of the story was your favorite, and send this video to someone who also needs to learn from stories like this. See you in the next video.